This is Eric from IONCINEMA.com at the 2025 Sundance Film Festival, sitting down with filmmaker Natalia León with the short animated film par excellence called Como si la tierra si las hubiera tragado. I hope that's close. Essentially, you're exploring a subject that plagues a lot of societies, a lot of countries. Before we plunge into the short, I'd like to know your background as a filmmaker. I did notice that there was co-production money from France as well, so maybe you're from Mexico, but maybe you're based physically in France. I don't know, but essentially I want to get a sense of your background, how animation came to you, and yeah, talk to me about animation as a toolbox for you.
So I was born and raised in Mexico.
Okay.
And I lived there until I was 17. And then at 17 I moved to France to pursue my studies. So I studied in Paris in an art school. So actually the film is fully produced by France because now I live there.
Yeah.
And actually this is my graduation film. Like I wrote it and developed it during my last year at school.
Yeah.
And then one of my teachers pushed me to produce it. So that's when I contacted a friend of his who's the producer, and that's why the film is like fully made with French money.
Yeah.
So actually in the program it appears as France. But for me it's both.
Of course.
Because I'm Mexican and the film is about Mexico and the actors are Mexican, so for me it's both. And when I got into the art school in Paris, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I first started in product design.
Okay.
But I was very frustrated with product design because I would design objects that weren't actually buildable. And so I was like, I think I don't like that my creativity has like a limit.
Yeah, that it's stunted, yeah.
So then I was like trying to see where I could go, and I started talking a lot with the animation, my
department or the people there, yeah.
The people there, and it sounded like very freeing, like because in animation you can do whatever you want. So I thought I was gonna give it a try, and I did, and it worked. Also because when I was a teenager, I wanted to be a filmmaker, but film school is really, really expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of let that dream go a little bit, and then I find my way back.
Wow.
When I found animation.
Yeah.
And like the reason why I wanted to tell this story with animation is because I felt that the drawings would allow me to find the sensibility and the poetic aspect that I was looking for. And also, I think there's something very powerful about talking about like very hard topics with things that aren't real, like drawings.
Yeah. That is a good point. You tap into this idea as women being disposable. This is inspired by a text that already exists. I believe it's book form. How did your research and your own findings, your own feelings, sort of like coexist in the writing process? How did it help shape what you wanted to get across in the way that you sort of like you chaptered out a lot of ideas? So I was curious about how the actual text and your ideas sort of like collaborated and came together.
Yeah. Well, actually this, like the research I started doing, at first it wasn't to make a film. It was just because I was very ashamed of the fact that I couldn't explain. Like, for example, people in France would tell me like, oh, but like why are so many women disappearing? And I would like go blank. I was like, well, I don't know. Because I like grew up in this violence.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like, for me it was normal in a way, and I felt very ashamed of it. So I wanted to understand. So that's why I started doing like this research at first to understanding. for understanding. And then that's when I developed like these feelings, because I drowned in like all these horrible stories.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had like to do a film for my graduation. I was like, I think I need to talk about this because I want to express all these feelings that I'm having. But I didn't want to address the subject
In a docu-style, maybe.
in a docu-style or another person's story. I wanted to use my own like approach, which is that I don't know any woman personally who has disappeared, but all of their stories affect me deeply.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the kind of relationship that I wanted to create between my characters. So Olivia, the main character, doesn't really know this girl who goes missing. She like sees her when she goes back from school, but she doesn't really know anything about her.
Mm-hmm.
And yet her story had a huge impact in like the way she then developed as an adult. And yeah, the text from Karen Villeda was a huge inspiration, because when I was reading her words, I felt like such a huge force, and it was super powerful and very poetic. And at the same time, when I was reading, I had like these very precise images.
Yeah.
And they had like a lot of meaning for me, but without being like super like straightforward, which I like.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like how I guess I mixed like both.
And it's interesting with the child is you get a sense that her mom is protecting her from violence by isolating her, but there's a whole bunch of moments like that in the film that I really appreciate. From the violence of the cat call when your protagonist comes off the bus, to the nightmare-esque objectification of women with the snake arms, there's even a moment where we see a cityscape, and it's very much like business as usual. It's like there's a normalcy, you know. It's towards the end of the film. I thought there was a lot of provocation, subtle provocation in this film. Tell me about the idea of like you tackling a whole bunch of like the garbage bag, the cat call, the dreams. How did all that research that you did, all that introspection that you did, how did you then map it out in the screenplay where you said, okay, I want this to be a physical presence or a reminder of something? How did that look like when you're writing it?
Yeah, so the film is about feminicide, right? Which is the big, like the extreme expression of violence towards women, so murder.
Mm-hmm.
It's women who are murdered because they are women.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really interesting to see like the complete opposite, which would be like the most common and the most normal way of expression of this violence, which is the catcalling,
yeah,
which is the looks,
yeah,
which for me are maybe like the least big deal, but
yeah.
they are like very impactful.
It's death by 1,000 cuts. Exactly. That's what that is.
And then since I had this the scene with the hands,
yeah,
that actually give the title to the film, I knew that this scene was going to exist. And with this scene, what I wanted to express was that the women are cut,
mm-hmm.
literally.
Mm-hmm.
Their bodies are cut and put into trashes of bag and then thrown on the street. But at the end of the day, the looks is also cutting the woman. So
mm-hmm.
it's like seeing the woman as only the breasts, or
yeah.
only the butt, or
yeah.
only the thighs. Is not seeing the woman as a human and as a whole, but is like cutting the woman through the eyes. And in this scene, I wanted to cut the woman through the camera, so like having like this very close-up two
Yeah.
parts of the body.
Yeah.
So that's why I decided to put this like little hint at the beginning of the film, because at the end it comes from the same type of violence.
Yes, it comes from the same place. The style of animation, so this is a film that takes place in two time periods, and I like how you use color to evoke passages into somebody's memory, but then I also like that towards the end of the film where you subvert that and you add like a whole, like it's as if you decolor the film and you put gray into it. I thought this was really, really clever in how we're able to go into two different time periods in the protagonist's life. How did that come about for you? I imagine it's a eureka moment. You say, "Oh, I think I've got a great idea here on how to use color."
Yeah. So of course, like the subject that I'm talking about is very horrible and hard, and I wanted also to include in my movie this other side of Mexico, which is an amazing place full of color and joy and warmth, because that is also a reality.
It's a contradiction of this country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's also the vision that I had as a kid, and a part of me, which is my kid self, also still has. So I definitely wanted to put that in the film as well, and I thought that the color, since Mexico is such a colorful country, was the right choice. And then, because I needed to differentiate like the present and the past, it made a lot of sense for me to then take away the color for the present, because then like the absence of color means the awareness that is growing in the child, and she realizing it that the country in which she is living is not like all warmth and all color, then there's also like all these other very awful things happening.
Yeah.
And that's why in the last scene, when the little girl looks at the bag
Garbage,
of trash,
yeah.
the garbage,
Yeah.
she realizes that the young girl is actually in the bag. And that's why like the black and white comes like from within her.
Yeah.
Because her, like the way she looks at her
It's
world
changed.
has completely changed. Yeah.
I quite like also going back to the dream sequence. I like how you have like a chant where all these women who have disappeared, there's like a chant where they're all talking in unison. So it gives this idea of like, there's like, I don't want to say power and unity, but there is that aspect where when we think about this film afterwards, that's what we want. We want women to take a stand, and so I quite like that aspect tonally. I'll end with two questions. In terms of influences, what are some other films that you might have thought of, or maybe artwork or stuff like that? And then also right now, are you looking towards other projects, and what are some themes or subjects that you'd like to explore?
Well, for the influences, I don't think that I can give you like a specific ones. Like, oh, I like
Reference this person.
yes, or this other. But of course, like, I think as creative person, we all have like a bunch of different influences. So for me, like, my influences are all the films that I have watched and that I've loved, especially like pace-wise. For me, it's very important, like the rhythm you give to each sequence, and the time and the silence as well. So I wouldn't be like, I could name like a bunch of things, but they would be like super
It's
tiny
fractions.
details.
Yeah.
Yes, and then for other subjects, I think Mexico is a huge inspiration for me. Every time I go back to visit my family, I get super inspired, and I want to tell like all these stories. And I think that my work is always gonna have a social
Component.
interest.
Yeah.
Yes, because that's what moves me. So right now I am researching for another film, also about Mexico.
Great.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for this this piece of cinema, and it was a nice introduction into you as an artist. So just congratulations, and enjoy traveling with the film as well, which is going to be really important, and especially if it's a France-backed project. The French love short film cinema. They promote that. They have great festivals for it. So I'll be watching out for you in the year ahead. So merci beaucoup, gracias for your time.
Merci beaucoup à vous.
Hey, this is Eric from IONCINEMA.com. If you want to support us, subscribe below. For more reviews, interviews, film festival coverage from Sundance, Cannes, Toronto, you want to check out these guys on this side.